Because good communication skills enhance your life. They give you a better life. And that's the sales pitch, really. I mean, because they do. If you have better communication skills, both interpersonal, professional, or ESL cultural, if we take that we talked about earlier, then you feel better. You feel more confident. You get along with people better. You try harder to get along with better people. You have a sense of humor about people and miscommunication. You don't fly off the handle as much. You give people a bit of space and a bit of say, well, I'm not going to assume the worst right off the bat.
Welcome to the Mindful Communication Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Miller, and on today's episode, we interview Ric Phillips. Ric is an executive communication coach and corporate trainer. He founded 3V Communications in 2007, which uses a holistic approach for communication skills development to help business leaders, consultants, entrepreneurs, managers, and their teams. It was great to have Ric on the show to talk about what kind of challenges people in the workplace typically face when it comes to communication skills. In this interview, I invite you to closely listen to the language that Ric uses. You can tell he's a seasoned veteran when it comes to communication skills, and he's mastered the art of nuances in his communication. In the first half of this interview, we talk about the benefits of working on your communication skills, both in the workplace and beyond the workplace. Ric, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So you are a communication coach / trainer. So what exactly does a communication coach and trainer do?
It's anything from consulting to one-on-one coaching to workshops or keynote speaking on the topics of communication skills.
And you're primarily working with business clients?
Yes, most of my clients these days are employed in the corporate world of some kind, but a wide range. So they're not all lawyers and doctors and engineers. There's a wide range of people, but most of them would fall into the category of professional, but not all.
And what kind of problems or issues or things are these individuals looking to work on?
So they have different pain points. Some people are worried about their job, either getting a job or keeping their job or getting promoted in their job. So they're worried about that. Some people are worried about relationships, whether work relationships or personal relationships. People are worried about how they sound to other people, how they're coming off, kind of first impression, or if they're using English as a second language, they're worried about, is there issues with accent or grammar that I'm not aware of? So these are the usual issues. It kind of all boils down to confidence, I would say. They may not say that. A lot of people don't, hi, I'm looking for more confidence. There are a few, but normally they don't. But that's sort of what, if you think like I think, it summarizes to the more confident someone is, the more functional they are, the more happy they are, and they're going to do better, right? So it usually comes down to these questions that are in their head going, wow, is there something missing? Is there something wrong? Is there something I need to work on, which eats away at their confidence?
So do you find that after clients work with you that that's kind of what they get, although they're thinking they're working on this communication skills, what they do is they come out and they just feel way more confident about whatever it is that they want to achieve? That's
my goal. Sometimes I tell them, sometimes I don't, but my goal is to get them feeling better and to make them more confident. The techniques are tools, right? You can give someone technique of anything, a sport, for example. Here's the technique, but they've got to play with it and practice and get feedback from the real world. Then their confidence grows because their competency grows. So as you know, when competency grows, your confidence grows. Then the paradigm shifts. Then you have a new level of understanding of what you can do. And then when that barrier gets broken, then you have a new level of confidence. Then you have a new idea of what you can do. And so this is the cycle we're trying to do. So like I said before, regardless of what communication issue they may come in to chat about, fundamentally, the way I'm looking at it is, okay, we need to kind of change the way they think and feel, specifically about self-esteem and confidence. And then, of course, performance.
Do you have any sort of story that you could tell us about somebody you worked with who you really saw a significant transformation in terms of that confidence, that communication?
I have a million stories because I'm doing this for over 10 years. One guy, David, I almost want to say it's an accident, so I almost don't want to take credit for this. He came in with specifically looking for confidence, and he was a man that was kicked, I suppose you could say. I mean, his wife had left him and took the kid into the States. He had a really hard time connecting with them and moving forward. He had jobs, but in and out of jobs. There's a variety of things like this. And he was kind of like a little bit grumpy, like just that kind of overall feeling you may get when you meet him. Not terribly so, but a little bit sullen, maybe a little bit And so we worked on a confidence program. I actually have a program called Communicating with Confidence. And through that, there was one day, and that's why I'm saying I don't want to take full credit for this. There was one day where he just had one of these aha epiphany moments where he realized that it was a comment that his mother had said about him to another lady when he was a child. She didn't know he was around the corner listening. So he happened, it's almost like a movie. He was around the corner. He heard this comment, the mother talking something negative about him, and it stuck with him all those times. And when he dug this up and realized that that was holding him back, there was a huge, huge weight lifted off him. And then the next time I saw him, he was this happy-go-lucky guy, you know, great, I'm doing this, I'm traveling, I got a job, it was a complete transformation. And I was actually looking at myself going, did I do that? And no, I didn't. Of course, I facilitated it in some ways, but it was his ability to be open and honest with himself and with the exercise we were doing, and to kind of say, like, you know, how do I think about the world? How do I think about myself? How do I think about females? How do I think about job? All these different things, mother, wife, sisters. And he came up with that. And I was like, wow, that was crazy, because I don't do therapy, right? That's the coaching looking forward, therapy is looking backwards, to briefly speak about it. My background is sociology and psychology at university. I have a sense of these things, but I don't try to be a therapist. Of course not. But it happened to be one of those moments where he came up with it himself, and I let him run with it. And it was crazy. So that's one of the things when you speak about confidence. I never forget that, the night and day of his body language, of his voice, of his eyes. It was crazy.
It's so that moment that you mentioned. I mean, I know those moments. I've had those moments in my life where I remember something from way back when, and just something happened or something was said, and it meant a whole bunch of things.
Right.
And it ruled my life. How do we have more of those kind of almost like breakthroughs in our lives? Because I just get the impression that there's tons of people out there that are all dealing with this kind of baggage. That's something that happened to them when they're younger. Who knows what it is? It seems like the most insignificant thing, and yet we forgot about it, and it's ruling our lives. So how do we get to that point?
You know, it's a great question. And I think if there's a therapist listening, they'll say, hey, you're a coach, not a therapist. And I think that's the first thing they would say. And so again, I'm going to be careful with what I say. One of my programs in particular, like this particular confidence program, does have some exercises that are similar to some therapy in terms of just self-discovery. And so there are these exercises, I guess what I'm saying, that people may find online or through a therapist or through a coach that can help them kind of discover it. To answer your question from a different point of view, I think the key thing is self-assessment and honesty. So we all have to kind of be comfortable always self-assessing ourselves, good, bad, and ugly, and being a little bit honest and saying, okay, what needs to be working? You know, what do we need to work on? But as I said before, coaching is about working forward. So if I have someone saying, I want to improve my public speaking, I'm not going to say, okay, tell me about your childhood. It may come up, but my focus won't be that. It'll be focused on where are you at now. Let's say you're a 7 out of 10. Let's just generalize and say you're a 7 out of 10 on public speaking skills. My job is to get you to 8 or 9 before your conference or whatever might be coming up. That's my focus. If there happens to be self-discovery, because coaching does bring that out, that's wonderful. But I'm not digging on purpose for that. It sometimes comes up on their own.
My understanding of coaching actually is that really what you want to do as a coach is it's about asking empowering questions and really creating the space so somebody can have that space to actually explore on their own. I don't know if you necessarily need to go into therapy to do that, but it's maybe discovering what happened in the past, acknowledging it, and then immediately moving forward. So I do think that there's that kind of coaching element that can be involved.
Absolutely. There's different styles of coaching, as you know, too, different certifications, different training, different thoughts. The style of coaching that I do, if someone's asked me, would be hybrid coaching. And so it's a combination of the modern life coaching where there's self-discovery, there's powerful questions, there's looking forward, not backwards, all that, just like you said. And then the other half is traditional coaching training, because I came from the world of teaching English as a second language for many, many years, classroom teaching. You teach people skills, you teach them something. And so I use that combination of classic teaching as well, teaching training skills with the modern life coaching. I don't like the idea, or I should say, I didn't like the idea of being a life coach when I first kind of discovered it. First of all, I felt I was too young at the time, and even now I'm probably too young. I think of a life coach as a silver-haired fox or something, right?
Yeah.
So, but there are elements there that I liked that I took from the training and added it to what I thought I was good at, which was classroom teaching and tutoring and coaching. And I kind of created my own snowball, which worked out well, actually, as a communication coach. I hit the ground running and already had skills and clients and, popped up a website in 2006 called communicationcoach.ca because nobody was using communication coach because nobody had put those two words together. So I was actually the first person to put the phrase communication coach together. A lot of people do it now all over the world, but I was the first one. So it's just, I just kind of said to myself, what am I interested in and maybe good at as far as my skill sets? And as I mentioned before, I had this, background in social and psych. I was good at English and drama in high school. I was interested in people. I was done with ESL teaching. I'd gone as far as I could go in terms of teaching business skills, and I was working with immigrants and all that stuff. And I just kind of put it on one big snowball. Additional training, coaching, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, this type of stuff, body language study. And I just said, boom, there's my snowball. And it worked out well. It worked out well.
Yeah, so your interest really evolved. It's such an interesting evolution. It started with social and psych, maybe to better understand people.
Right.
And then it evolved to teaching English to foreign students. And now you're coaching individuals in the workplace to be more confident. It's such an interesting little evolution.
It is. And when you kind of look at it, like if you look at the stream, it's all connected, but it's when you look at the big picture, sometimes you may not see it. But yeah, I mean, for example, 60% of my clients are immigrants, foreign workers, right? So they're not an ESL student. They're obviously much more advanced, but they've still got the same worries, right? How's my accent? How's my communication? Is the body language from my hometown, does it work here or not? What do these crazy Canadian HR people expect of me? Because they're not telling me. Because all they say is things like, you need to work on your communication skills. Right. And he says, great, what's that? And they go, I'm not allowed to tell you. Why is that? Well, I don't want to get in trouble, being the political environment we're in. And it's just true. And everybody you say that to agrees. And then the moment you go on a podcast and say it, you're like, well, you're being wrong. No, I'm not wrong. It's absolutely correct. And if you speak to HR people, and more importantly, if you speak to immigrants that are working, more often than not, of course, not 100%, but more often than not, they will tell you that. They'll say, I got some generic feedback from my manager or the HR that I don't know what it means, and it paranoids me. And then they go looking for a communication coach or a trainer or a classroom, and that's they're saying, like, help me. I think something might be wrong. My job might be at jeopardy. I'm like, great, what's the feedback? They're like, I don't know. I'm supposed to work on my communication skills. So you got to feel for them in that scenario. And because of my background working with a variety of people from different countries for many, many years, I'm able to, do assessments and all that stuff and find out what is it really that's the English quote unquote part, or really what's the communication part. And again, confidence. We come back to this as well. So being this hybrid coach really works not just in terms of the style, but also the variety of things that I'm able to kind of tackle with people.
How do you think that these communication skills that you're teaching, how has it impacted your own life?
You get paranoid yourself, don't you? You learn to self-assess all the time. You learn to put your money where your mouth is. You learn to be less judgmental because you're going to get somebody judging you. You learn to have a much better sense of humor about life, about people. Now, to give you a more concrete example.
Yeah.
I was crossing the street one time in a car, an SUV. I'm not going to say almost hit me, but it was on the path of hitting me. Then she slammed on the brakes and everything was fine. I wasn't touched by the vehicle, but that moment that your heart starts racing, you're in shock, right? Because that vehicle, so you think that and so I probably my eyes widened, I popped and I yelled something, probably very short, just a quick little word. And, I think I even reached out and slapped her taillight or something, just as a reaction.
Right.
And then, which is a very human reaction to,
very human. Yeah.
And then immediately, I probably saw her face and I knew that obviously it wasn't on purpose. It was an accident and there was no harm, no foul. And immediately I was able to just right off that calm myself down, realize, you know what? Everybody's human. Everybody, like, she was maybe distracted or maybe, didn't see me or whatever. Like, this is a human thing and there is no damage done. And so as I was walking the street and she drove by me, I purposefully made myself feel very calm and happy. I did not make eye contact. I did not give some, ugly look and some, piercing eyes. Like, I didn't do any of that, which I may have done, 10, 15 years ago as a further scowl. No, I was like completely okay. It's all good. Like, it's completely behind me. In a matter of 2 seconds, I was able to put that behind me and just carry on and not give her any further negative energy as well. And I was happy with that. I was really happy with that. That's just a small example. Another example is on the subway, the TTC here. If you take the TTC, it's a great place to watch people.
The TTC, by the way, for those who are not listening from Toronto, is the Toronto Transit Commission. It's our wonderful subway system that has many, many delays on it.
Very good. Very good. It's absolutely fantastic. So it's any transit system, really, you'll find that when the doors open, people are supposed to come and go. And you'll always find people that stand there in the way. Just like an escalator. People get off the escalator and there's people that stand there.
Oh, yeah.
And so your natural reaction is to kick them, to punch them. I'm saying in your head, right? You're the child in you wants to push them and yell at them and curse them out. And of course, you don't do that. That's not fair. But the question someone might say is, well, why are you getting yourself stressed out about this? Well, that person shouldn't have done this. And don't they have, yeah, but why are you getting stressed out about it? Why are you taking on that energy? Why are you making yourself angrier or maybe even ruining your day for an hour, even full day? Are you still talking about the event 2 hours later, 4 hours later to people that will listen? What has that done to your psyche for 4 or 5 hours? And so it's like, this is what I mean by self-assessment. You catch yourself and you go, okay, the first reaction is human. Like you were surprised by something. Maybe a car almost hit you. Maybe the person did stand in the way and you had to kind of dodge them. Yes, that's human reaction. Maybe you even said so. Okay, it's human. But the ability to catch yourself, to filter it, to switch off and just go, okay, la la la, it's all good. Here's my happy place. Let's go on. Because it's not about, you. It's they may do what they're going to do and that's okay. You manage yourself. They will manage their self. And finally, the last point of this is how the hell do you know what the hell was in their mind? Why are we so judgmental? And this is like an inner dialogue you have to have with yourself, which I would have with myself. Why the hell are you so judgmental that you can think you can read someone's mind and actually know why they're doing their behavior? In other words, if I say, well, that person's a jerk or that person did that, how do I know? Again, ask yourself, have you ever by accident, even by accident once, come out of an elevator or an escalator and just stopped? Once in your life, twice? Of course you have. But 99% of the time you don't do it. You're a good citizen. You walk left, stand right, as we do in Toronto, all that stuff. But every once in a while you'll mess up. And so you have to look at other people that way too. Say, why should I assume the worst? Assume that they're a jerk, assuming that their behavior is done on purpose or malicious reasons. I don't know. This thinking is better than assuming the worst and saying, well, they're obviously a jerk and I'm the social police. So I have to give them a sneer. I have to give them a scowl. I have to say something. It's two choices, right? Which one's going to keep you happier? Which one's going to keep you living longer? And so this is when we learn communication skills, because goodness sakes, I certainly wasn't born with, certain things that I may have developed now. It's like, you have to ask yourself, like, what am I teaching? What am I learning? What am I studying? How can I apply it to myself? If you're not doing it yourself, you're not a good example, are you?
It's so interesting. I love all these examples that you gave. So one thing that's becoming really present for me is we're starting this conversation on communication skills, and there's almost like it's either a misconception on someone's part or just a misunderstanding. But we were talking about in these examples was living a more peaceful life,
right? And
how does that relate to communication skills?
Because good communication skills enhance your life; they give you a better life, and that's the sales pitch, really. I mean, because they do. If you have better communication skills, both interpersonal, professional, or ESL cultural, if we take that we talked about earlier, then you feel better. You feel more confident. You get along with people better. You try harder to get along with better people. You have a sense of humor about people and miscommunication. You don't fly off the handle as much. You give people a bit of space and a bit of say, well, I'm not going to assume the worst right off the bat. And on the performance side of things, if you know a few tricks, let's just say an interview of any kind, what do I do with my body language and what do I do with my eye contact and what do I do with my words? Then that's obviously going to give you a sense of control. Some might argue a false sense of control, but it gives you a sense of, at least I can plan this interview or this date, or I can plan this meeting with the boss when I'm asking for a raise or whatever it might be, and gives you something. It's just not just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, but you can give some confidence that you have some structure to follow. So this is how it makes your life better. I don't know what perfect is. I don't necessarily believe in perfect. I like the 80-20 rule myself, 80% healthy food, 20% junk food. That's a good rule for me is if you're doing things as best you can, give yourself permission to fail a bit and to learn a bit and give other people permission. That's the way I like to do. But yeah, I would say that good communication skills or even trying to learn communication skills of any kind give you a sense of purpose and improvement.
You're tuned in to the Mindful Communication Podcast, and today we're interviewing Ric Phillips. In the first half of this interview, we talked about the benefits of having great communication skills. No surprise there. And I loved the concrete examples that really demonstrate the power of changing your mindset using your communication skills. In the second half of this interview, we get more into the nitty-gritty of how to apply these communication skills. We talk about body language, and Ric gives us some valuable advice to help us succeed in the workplace and beyond. There's also something else that comes to my mind is this idea that as you learn communication skills, you become a better coworker, family member, blah, blah, blah. There's also a level of internal dialogue that happens because when you were giving your examples of things that you wanted to say to a person or do to a person, it sounded like that was the conversation that was happening in your head. And so it's almost like we're using communication as a tool to better understand what's going on in our head.
Right. And to self-aware, to say, these are my original thoughts or my instinctual thoughts. And is it okay? And the safe answer is, well, yes, I'm human. I guess it's okay to be instinctual. But then the next question is, what are you going to act on? So I always think of it like a filtering system. So whatever comes at you, let's say someone says some bad words to you for whatever reason, or it's an email that's a nasty email, whatever it is, the ability to have a filter is the important thing. Yes, you can have whatever natural reaction because you're human, depending on your personality and whatever else. But to have a filter, this is okay, here's how I'm going to answer this maybe more professionally, politely, positively, or how I'm going to change it this way, or whatever. The filter is what a lot of people are missing.
Yeah.
Filter. And people argue about this because they wonder, well, I want to be real and genuine, and I want to be authentic, and I don't want to be fake. And,
right.
And it's a valid argument. And you will hear people like myself, like Mark Bowden, your other guests, who say that being authentic is good to a certain point. But at the same time, you want to be able to present yourself properly in society so that you're accepted by the social norms. If you go around acting exactly what you're thinking and feeling all the time, you will set people off. They won't know how to take you. They won't trust you at times. They might think that you're kind of a weirdo or whatever. Is it fair? You could argue it's not fair, but these are humans we're dealing with.
Yeah, there's an impact to that almost like that level of authenticity.
Exactly. So I love the word genuine and sincere. I use it all the time in my coaching and training. Meaning I don't want people to be polished and fake and saying things they don't believe. Let's go back to the salesperson, right? Like, you want a salesperson who actually believes in the product that they're trying to sell you.
Yeah.
Just for example, right? And not someone who just read the script. It's kind of the same thing. Like whatever you're going to do, I want people to be genuine and sincere. It's very important. And then you don't mind if they're not as polished because you feel they're genuine and sincere. So I definitely believe in that. But the idea that you can always just be yourself without understanding the social masks, without understanding the social norms, is difficult if you want to fit into society. And society, as you know, is the study of groups. It's the study of how we get along in a group. So that's what you have to learn. What are the rules? Do you like the rules? Hate the rules? That's up to you. You may hate them. You may disagree. But the question I would have is, do you want to follow them just to get along, to get what you want in life? And I'll leave that up to the listener to choose. So I'll just go back to an interview, for example. There's two pieces of advice when someone has a job interview, or a date for that matter, but a job interview is best. One advice is just be yourself. And the other advice is prepare.
Right.
Right? So this is the two streams of thought. If you're just yourself, we could argue you're being genuine and sincere. If you didn't get the job, it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't a good fit. Or we could argue that some of those answers that you gave that didn't get you the job could have been if you prepared properly with authentic answers, but still prepared properly, would have given you a chance to get that job. And then a lot of people understand that preparation is important. Again, your body, how you're sitting, how you're dressing, the typical answers. So it's that balance, isn't it? Right? If you're too fake, they can smell it.
Yeah.
And if yeah, absolutely. Everyone has a built-in BS detector, right?
For sure.
Like I know we're going to talk about body language and people talk about all these secrets and stuff, but everybody has a built-in BS. You don't have to be a body language expert to tell. Now you can't prove it, but you get the sense.
Yeah, you just know.
You get the sense. At least you believe you know anyway, right?
Oh, yeah,
you get that
believe
sense.
you know.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't want to go that way. You don't want to go the other way where you just show up and like, hi, it's me. You're probably not going to hire me, but that's okay. And you got to find that balance of what's going to fit in. How do I fit into this? How do I prove that I fit into this corporate culture or this, whatever it might be? So again, I'm speaking as a sociologist. So nobody has to agree with me on this one, but I like society. I believe in society. I pay my taxes. I'm a citizen. Meaning that I understand there's social norms and rules and I try to follow them. That's something I like. I believe that helps things, go smoother in life. Know the rules, play the game, and you'll be more successful.
I love the example. So I'm just thinking back to what it is that you said. I love this example. It seems kind of like this tug of war, really. The full authenticity and also managing expectations. Mm-hmm. And really, it sounds like as we go through life, especially in a society, and especially maybe one in like Toronto where there's so many different people and so many different expectations, it's really just trying to find a balance between these two.
Right, and being comfortable with the balance. This is so important. So whatever anybody teaches you, and then we're talking about communication skills, right? So you take a course, you read a book, you listen to a podcast. Okay, somebody gives you some suggestion or advice. That's great, but you have to feel comfortable with it. I'll give you another example. There was a long time ago, a friend of mine was working at an IT company. He had a trainer come in, and he told me about the trainer after he taught all these skills about power and leadership and all that stuff. Great stuff. And the trainer told them that you have to make eye contact with everyone for 7 seconds. And so they did an exercise where
7 seconds.
7 seconds. So they did an exercise where the person had to essentially stare at each person for 7 seconds. And this concept was this kind of idea of leadership and power and authority and control and all that stuff. Well, I mean, you can tell just when I said it how uncomfortable that sounds.
Yeah.
And if you ever try it, it's ridiculous. And I mean, again, from a certain point of view,
because 7 seconds might not seem like a long time, but that's a long time to be doing that one thing.
So imagine if you're teaching or training or talking or leading a group or having a meeting, whatever it is, and you told yourself in your head you're going to stare at everyone for 7 seconds, at that boardroom or whatever. Man, like talk about being, putting yourself in an uncomfortable scenario and putting them in an uncomfortable scenario.
Yeah.
Because the normal rules of this society say that, yes, you need to have eye contact, 80% or so, but it's got to be for 2 or 3 seconds and you look away. You have to kind of look away a bit. You have to have these rules of, social inattention where someone walks by in the street, you acknowledge them as a human and you absolutely look away before you cross paths. If you stare at someone when you're walking past them, they will stare right back at you with wonderment, right? So the idea is that you're walking the street, you see someone from afar. As you walk, there's a certain distance, eye contact distance, where you look and you acknowledge them as a human. This is totally true from the anthropologists. And after you've acknowledged each other, then you look away. This is called social inattention. It's super polite to do. So if you break the rule by either not making eye contact whatsoever the whole way through, or the opposite, which is staring the whole way through, either way, it sets the other person off. Like, what's going on? What is this, a weird person? Whatever. So there's these rules. So it's not far be it for me to step on the toes of another trainer, but it's up to everyone to decide what they want to do and maybe try it themselves. But I thought about that and I tried it. 7 seconds doesn't work for me. I don't know about you, but I couldn't imagine doing that. So being comfortable inside yourself with whatever advice you're taking on is important. It's like trying on the right shoe, right? So there's a lot of advice out there, right?
Yeah, I think it's like knowing is fine, but it's really about putting it into practice and seeing what really works for you and what kind of that impact is and judging like, am I ready to have this kind of impact or do I want to have a little bit of different one?
Right. And is it comfortable? Like there's nothing wrong with fake it till you make it with certain things. Of course, we have to try on new things to see if they work. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to feel good about it. You have to kind of understand, why am I doing it? How's it feel? And that growing pains are natural. That's fine. We've all done that. Someone practices active listening, for example, like you have to, okay, I'm going to concentrate. I'm going to nod my head. I'm going to acknowledge I'm going to have empathy. I'm going to acknowledge their point. I'm maybe going to make a quick comment about it to show them that I heard them. This takes work. And so that's fine. That's just one example where as long as you're comfortable, you can learn those skills. You can maybe, you're not going to do it all the time, but if you feel an important conversation's coming up, you'll say, okay, let me turn on my ears for this. But otherwise, you're just being your normal self.
Yeah, not to mention, I love that example, the active listening, and you really broke it down. Okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I mean, we also don't want to be thinking that in our conversation, right?
Right.
Because we do want to come off as authentic.
Right. It's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so the people that are good at it, either naturally or through training or whatever, they seem seamless. We don't notice that they're doing all these things with their body language, with their voice. We don't notice. We feel comfortable. We feel they're a good friend or listening to us, whatever, or a good coach or a good boss, and that's great. And that's sort of what we're trying to do, right? Is help people feel more comfortable, more authentic, and talk to each other in a way that's, producing good feelings so that everyone can get along. Doesn't mean you can't have difficult conversations. One of the points of your podcast is to also navigate, difficult conversations. And I understand that's very important. So it's all about, okay, if I had to navigate a difficult conversation, what's the best way? How do I set up for this? Non-verbally, verbally, how can I get the point across, but do it in a way that's respectful and doesn't leave the person feeling crushed and all that stuff.
Yeah, loving it. So I'm hearing just a lot about balance and a lot about comfort at the same time and really kind of honing on those.
Yep.
I want to talk a little bit about body language. Now, so your company, it's 3V Communications.
Right.
3V stand for?
Verbal, vocal, visual.
Awesome. And so nonverbal, I imagine, is kind of a part of that. Mm-hmm. How much do you emphasize nonverbal communication in some of your training?
It's a great question. So the company, as you said, 3V Communications represents the three modalities. So in a broad spectrum, we communicate verbally, which is your words and grammar, word choice, grammar, all that stuff, syntax. And vocally is your paralanguage, it's your rhythm, speed, volume, intonation, basically your delivery method. When your mom said it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's kind of that. And the last one, visual communication, includes body language, gestures, but it also includes clothing or how your office is set up. Do you have a Mac or a PC, like whatever someone's going to judge you on. So it is the bigger chunk. And nonverbal communication, this is a common misnomer. People say, well, nonverbal communication is body language, right? Well, no, body language is one part of. So nonverbal communication is the last two V's, right? So it's your tone, how you say something. It's your body language. It's what they see. It's the feeling they're getting. All these things are nonverbal communication. Is verbal communication important? Yes, it is. If you ask a speechwriter, they're going to tell you, of course it is. You have to have the right words, and I agree with that. But it's not as important as how it's delivered. You think of a famous speech by whoever. I'll just take Martin Luther King Jr. because obviously it's a very famous speech. The "I Have a Dream" speech. The words themselves are absolutely great, but it's the delivery that we're left with, right? The feeling of the delivery. It's the voice, and we don't even see most times you don't even see the video, right? You just hear it audio, and you're like, wow, like such a powerful thing. So that's just one quick example of how the nonverbal trumps the verbal communication. It's not to say we can ignore verbal, but it trumps it. So texts and emails these days have a lot more emojis, right? Why? 10 years ago, I was teaching people, don't do this in business, right? It's childish. Now I'm teaching, do this in business. Absolutely. Because why? Because it helps you communicate the tone and the message, because the words themselves are harder to get the message across. So to answer your question, the style of my company is holistic approach, meaning all 3 V's. How do we synchronize them to increase your chance of sending the right message? Or if you want to mix and match them, that's fine. How do you do it on purpose? So I want my clients to understand both verbal, nonverbal, or verbal, vocal, visual. It's all together. You can't separate them.
I love that you mentioned that you now recommend emojis in the business context. And I was just speaking with a mutual friend of ours, Mark Bowden, about how email and text, it strips all of the kind of subtle context. And so you're recommending emojis, maybe put that back in to the email and text. And that's totally okay in the business environment you'd recommend?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's not even me kind of being like some sort of icebreaker and saying like, oh, this is a great idea. No, it's already happening. Like I'm reflecting what is happening with the clients. Are they using as many as the teenagers with their text? No, there's certain select ones, happy faces, sad faces. There's select ones that are very common.
Yeah.
Think of it this way too. Let's say someone writes an email in all caps.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
The feeling we're getting is that they're shouting at us,
yeah.
right? This is an example of someone putting tone to words.
Right.
So if someone writes something, says something like, hey, Jonathan, don't be late for our 2:30 meeting, period. You don't know what that is. Like, well, is that sarcastic? Is that a joke? I'm not sure. You have to kind of judge it based on maybe context of the person. But if someone says, hey, Jonathan, don't be late for our 2:30 meeting, smiley face, it's clear that the intention was to joke. You could challenge them later if you want to say, hey, I didn't appreciate that joke or whatever, but at least they're trying to tell you the tone. If they left you a voice message, you would hear it in their voice.
Right. This
is the whole thing, right? And face-to-face is even more easier to tell, right? So as we go down that list from the 3 V's altogether to just the vocal through phone to just the verbal, let's say text or email, you're losing opportunities to communicate your intended attitudes and feelings. And so texting, I could argue all I want. Oh, don't text in business. No, people are doing it all the time. It's not about my choice. People, I don't know why they're doing it, but bosses and people are sometimes texting each other. It's not even just email anymore. They're everyone's. So, go with the flow a bit. Understand that there are tools available. Yes, it's important to choose your words correctly, but there are tools available that you can use to enhance your tone, to enhance your message, your attitudes and feelings. So why not use them?
There is one example I can think of in a workplace that I used to work with. There was an individual who would use a lot of smiley faces. And the way that this person occurred to me was kind of inauthentic. That this person wasn't always forthcoming with how it is that they were feeling or what it is that they were thinking. So I would also imagine that with what you said, there's a word of caution is beware of overusage, because you can come off still as inauthentic even with all these extra context.
Absolutely. As you said yourself, the feeling you got was that the person was being unauthentic. We don't know the truth, right? Maybe that's exactly what the case was, or maybe that person was paranoid in such a way that they wanted to make sure that every single line they sent was intended to be in a positive way. So the only way they express themselves was with the smiley face. So it was like, have a nice day with a smiley face. And it was like, great to meet you today, smiley face. Great meeting today. Thanks for your input, smiley face. And you're thinking to yourself, well, what's with all the smiley faces? But maybe in their mind, the way they're looking at it is like, if I was in person, I'd be smiling when I said it.
Right.
So yes, you're right. I mean, these are tools and we have to be careful how we're using it. And there is overuse. But once again, we'll go back to this. Well, how do I really know 100% for sure what that person's thinking?
Yeah.
We can guess, but if you go back and say, well, if I promise myself not to guess, then you just give people latitude. Say, okay, it's all good. I'll take this, until I know otherwise as a good thing. And then, but if you're their friend or their mentor or coach or their boss, you may actually say that to them per your role. You may say, look, I've noticed that you have a lot of emojis or smiley faces in your email. I think that we could probably reduce a couple that's absolutely something that can be spoken to with the colleagues and in work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although it might be uncomfortable for some people to have that conversation, I definitely think that that's a pretty reasonable conversation to have.
Because you like difficult conversations, so
I
it's
love
okay.
difficult conversations, yeah. Hey, you know what? I only like them because I've had so much practice with them now, and now they're actually not that difficult, and it's kind of like this dance that we have in the conversation, and I find it really interesting. I was going to ask a question. I totally forgot. One thing I wanted to ask you about was you talked about the idea that we make these assumptions, we have these inferences, and to move away from that, and it sounds like you're working or you have moved away from that. That's a huge mindset shift, I think, for a lot of us. What are maybe some first steps that we can take to stop making all those assumptions, to start forgiving people more easily and realize that we're all just humans, we're all just trying to get by?
Right. So the exercise I like that I do myself and teach my clients is you put your hand down on the table or your knee, whatever, you put your hand down, and obviously there's 4 fingers and a thumb. Let's just call them 5. So then what you do is you say, okay, you think about an actual example of where somebody did something and you didn't like it or you were confused or whatever. So let's take the person with the emoji who sent the smiley face all the time. So my question to you would be, okay, what is your best guess of why they're doing this behavior? And you would say, as you did before, you say, well, I think that they're maybe being inauthentic and hiding something. So that's the thumb. That's the biggest reason. That's the thumb. Maybe that's 80% the possibility, right? And then I say, okay, next finger, what's another reason that possibly might be the reason? And then you say,
could be that they really are happy all the time.
Okay. And what's another reason that maybe they're doing all these smiley faces with all their emails?
Maybe they're just really concerned about impressing me and not stepping on my toes.
Right. And what's another reason? Because we're at the 4th finger.
They could just be really nervous about their job and they just want to make sure that they look good to everyone.
And finally, the baby finger. One more reason.
A little baby reason is they just really like smiley faces.
See? So right there, even though you may think your first or second answer is the most logical based on your experience, that could be. But by forcing yourself to come up with 5 reasons, or let's say 4 additional ones, you force yourself to say, you know what? I don't really know for sure that the first one, the thumb, is the real reason why they did that. And so it trains you, as I said before, to give yourself some latitude to say, oh, I don't know for sure. Everybody, has assumptions of why people do things, but that's the exercise you can do. And even the baby finger, once in a while, the baby finger is the reason why they're doing something.
Yeah.
Once in a while. And you could do it to yourself too. So that's the key. So you could just put your hand down and say to yourself, even in your head, you can start like, well, this is my first guess of why they're doing what they're doing. But what if I had to force myself to come up with 3 or 4 more reasons, what would they be? By the time you get to the last one, you're like, yeah, I guess I really don't know for sure why they're doing what they're doing.
And I guess that this is kind of the initial exercise that someone would start with. And over time, with either that exercise or just with practice in general of constantly second guessing the first reason, is that it becomes more and more like habit.
Yeah, the idea is to build a filtering system up. And so it's not to dismiss your instincts, okay? Because your instincts are there for a reason and they're there to protect you, right? We evolved, if we take evolution as a given, we evolved to survive. And so these instincts of how the brain works, how we read nonverbal communication cues in the world, this is all very important. If you have a bad feeling in your gut, there's a good reason to pay attention to that, not to override it. So we're not saying that you shouldn't pay attention, and we're not saying that maybe your first guess isn't correct. What we're saying is, before you jump the gun, before you act on it, before you do whatever, is to think to yourself, are there other reasons that might possibly be the result of this behavior? And then that slows you down. It slows you down from that quick email or that quick chat or whatever, and then you filter it a bit. At the end of the day, you're going to do what you're going to do, but at least you've got a filtering system. This is the key, is to have a bit of a filtering system.
And there's also something I just picked up on that you did right there, and it's kind of like a filtering system. I love it, is that you said, if we take evolution as a given, right away, I know that in my speech, I do take it as a given. And so when I speak, I just say it like it's a given.
Right.
And by saying take it as a given, you created the space so that if other people don't see it that way, that there is something else that we can discuss afterwards. I absolutely love that. So
nice. Yeah, thank you. We're talking about business communications and all that stuff. You got to be careful with your knowledge and your assumptions, and you got to be careful not to offend people if possible. And you give them the space to make their own decisions. But you're allowed to say what you want from your point of view, as you do. But yeah, it's nice sometimes to have a bit of a softener as opposed to a demand.
Love it. Now, Rick, I also know that you're involved with an organization, the National Communication Coaches Association of Canada. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Great. So thank you. NCCA Canada is a nonprofit, and it's the whole idea of it is to create a home, so to speak, for communication coaches, trainers, or maybe even communication skills enthusiasts. It's a place where we're looking at networking events, professional development events, so that the coaches and trainers can get better at their craft and that people can get access to them. So we have events that allow coaches and trainers to network with small business owners and entrepreneurs, for example. So everyone's trying to find some connections. So the small business people are saying, well, how do I make my communication better? Maybe bring on a trainer to the company. Let's meet them. And then oppositely, the coaches and trainers are looking for business. It's one of the main things we do. We have blogs. We're looking at webinars and podcasts and things like this. So we do want to, we're fairly young and we're growing. And our headquarters is in Toronto right now, but we're definitely looking to expand and to get more involvement in Canada. And right now it's a special. It's $30 for a year membership. It's you can't beat that, just to be involved and to have your say in the communication world.
We talked about a lot of great things today. Mm-hmm. Maybe one tip you want to leave listeners with that they can implement in their life this week that will make a difference in their life.
That's tricky. There's a lot of stuff.
Well, you only get to choose one.
Yeah, that's tough. There's a lot of different things to improve on. I would say that, okay, here's what I'll say. I'll say the most important tip I can say to them is make yourself a deal that you're going to break your comfort zone this week or next week. That's what I would say. If they want to focus on a communication related thing, that's great. If they want to go skydiving, that's also fine. When you break your comfort zones, you learn new ways of thinking about yourself and the world, right? We talked about this a little bit earlier. Your paradigms shift a bit, and you build confidence by building competency and vice versa. So I think that if they think themselves as a shy person, then they can ask themselves, what's one thing I'm going to do this week? It's maybe I'm going to speak more than one word to the coffee barista. So I'm not going to say hello and then thank you. I'm going to say, hello, how are you? And then thank you very much. And then the next time they go in, maybe they're going to go, hello, how are you? Nice day today. And then they're going to say, thanks very much. See you tomorrow. It's the build. So they don't have to go right off into the best conversations in the world. So that's what I would challenge people to do, is to say, whatever you want to work on, take yourself where you're at now and say, okay, how do I break this comfort zone? What's one thing I can do and work on this week and next? That's what I would challenge people with.
How can listeners get in touch with you if they want to know more about what you do or some of the work that you're up to?
So website, communicationcoach.ca or 3vcommunications.ca. Social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn.
And we'll include all that information in the show notes, of course.
Great. And email is the best, of course. It's email or phone to reach out directly, and we'll go from there.
Rick, I can't thank you enough for coming in today. This was a ton of fun. Thank you so much for all the great tips and the great insights. And I wish you best of luck on your business and with all your clients.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Big thanks goes out to Rick for coming onto the show. We are on a mission here to create a more connected and communicative world. If that's something that you're interested in supporting, please give this podcast a great review and rating. Also, be sure to share it with friends and family on social media. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, please make sure to subscribe. You can get loads of great communication tips on the Mindful Communication Instagram page at Mindful Communication and on the Facebook page at Mindful Comms, COMMS. And make sure to go to mindfulcommunication.me to see what programs we're offering there. Today's theme music was provided by Shinogo. You can pick up Shinogo's music wherever you get your music. And editing was done by Maya Miller. Thanks for tuning in to the Mindful Communication Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Jonathan Miller, and we'll see you next time.